Howdy everybody, I'm JT. This is Component Studio Unleashed. I put these cards out for most people. If you weren't here, you might not have gotten one of these, but this card is just a little brochure for Component Studio, but the important bit is that at the bottom here, there is a code. If you don't have Component Studio, and we did a survey early on, or a couple of weeks ago, and about half of you have never heard of or used Component Studio. So I'm giving you this card so that you have the little coupon code at the bottom. It will give you Component Studio for half off for as long as you stay subscribed. So it's $4.99 a month if you choose to use it, but you have to use it by Christmas because that code goes away at Christmas. So anyway, just in case you decide to sign up for this after we are done here, then you have a way to get it a lot cheaper. So, okay. Welcome. Show of hands quick, because the survey only had about half of you. How many have used Component Studio? About half of you. Okay. All right. So how many of you have completed at least a project in Component Studio? Okay. And how many of you have at least heard of Component Studio? And vice versa?
What's that mean?
Who hasn't heard of Component Studio? All right. There we go. Good. All right. So not many haven't heard of it, but good. That'll help. Originally, this was going to be a power users class. Basically, we're going to go into like hardcore Component Studio stuff. But because half of you haven't even used it, I can't do that. That doesn't make any sense. We will cover some power user stuff for those of you who have used it toward the end. But we're going to kind of go through some basics and just kind of show you a little bit about what Component Studio is. But because the audience is fairly diverse here, I'm going to cover a lot of ground. Note that if you're new, there are lots of videos out on our YouTube channel to show you some of those things. So if you missed something, don't worry about that, right? Also, this presentation is going to be recorded, or is being recorded, and it's broadcast live right now. So it will be on our YouTube channel later. So if you missed something during this presentation, you're also good, okay? And then for you advanced people, there will be plenty of little tidbits, I am sure. So I mentioned I'm covering a lot. Different people want different things, so this is why we're going to do that. I'm going to go fast. I already said that, and I'm happy to help you outside of this room, right? We're going to cover a lot of stuff in here. Feel free to ask questions, but if you need one-on-one assistance, this is not the time to do that. We will do that either sometime throughout Protospiel or later tonight or sometime after Protospiel altogether. It's up to you when you want to do that, but I'm happy to help people, use the system. Okay, so first I think we should talk a little bit about what Component Studio is and what's possible. So Component Studio is basically an editor. So something that you could design in Photoshop or Illustrator, you could design in Component Studio. So if you have a card that you want to lay out or a chit that you want to lay out, that sort of thing, you can use Component Studio to do this. The reason you'd use Component Studio instead of one of those tools is that it automates everything for you. So if you design one card that is of a particular layout, it will automatically design every other card in that deck. So you don't have to do them. That means when you need to make a change, and game designers change their components all the time, you can update the one card and it will automatically update all of the other cards for you, right? And that works for chits and anything, really. Some people design one-off things in here, like game boards and boxes and stuff, and I don't know why, because this is not a good tool for one-off things. Like, feel free to use it if you want to, but this is designed specifically for automation. That's what Component Studio is all about. I think that Illustrator and Photoshop and InDesign and those kind of apps are much better suited when you're doing the one-off thing. They're a better app, a better fit. That doesn't mean you can't use Component Studio for those things. I just think you should use the better tool for the job. So if you're designing a lot of something, or even you're designing more than one of a given type of component, Component Studio is the thing you should use. If you're designing one, a manual, a box, a game board, that sort of thing, then use a different tool. That's my advice as the guy that wrote the tool, right? All right, So you can do pretty much anything you want. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of games that I have designed in this, just some components. I'm going to show you some of the things that I have done and how it works. And then we're actually going to go through, here, I'll put that up there too. We're going to actually go through and I'll show you some of the basics of Component Studio, and then we're going to build something live right here. Now that's probably a bad idea. I don't know if any of you have ever spoken at conventions before, but using an internet-based thing at a convention is a terrible idea. Anything could go wrong. The internet is slow as hell, but we're going to try it anyway, and hopefully it works. So wish me luck. Okay.
Just sit back and laugh when it goes wrong.
That's right, yes. Okay, so let's go over here. This is a card I designed in Component Studio. You can see if I just click this little button.
Is that what you want us to see?
Oh, no. That's, what is going on here? Oh, I'm not mirroring probably. System preferences, let's do this quick. Everything went wrong, right? Yeah. Displays, mirror. Mirror. Hey! Okay. Yeah, let's do this. There, that's a card I designed in Component Studio. Does that look more like a card? Okay. Now, here's the thing. If I click right over here, actually you can see the complete list of all of the cards that this thing has designed, because I designed this first one, all the rest of them are here. So if I just click this little arrow, it will load the next card. And you can see that it filled in new graphics, new stats, whatever, right? So if I just click through these, it will actually load the next one. Now, depending on what you have in your card, it can take a while to load. In this case, I'm doing something really crazy that you should never do. But it's just to show off what's possible in Component Studio. So this actually takes a long time to load because of what I'm doing here. When I'm actually designing the card, I turn off the elements that take a long time to load. Because believe it or not, there's actually an image built into this card that is 180 times the size of the card, because I wanted to do something fancy. There is something called parallax. Is anybody here familiar with what a parallax is? Okay, only a couple people. So a parallax is, you've seen it before, you just don't know what the word is. In a video game or an animation or any Bugs Bunny cartoon you've ever seen, the background moves at a different speed than the foreground. And you can have many layers of this going on, right? So now if I go back here, in fact I'll go back to Anthony, watch this little building outline. Could you see that? It's really light in there, right? And watch this grass and that sort of stuff. If I go forward, that little building outline just moved a little bit right here, right? And then when I go forward again, now it's behind her and the next building is coming over. The grass is moving across here too. So what I did with Component Studio here is I've automated that parallax effect so that every card has a unique background, right? Now that's really cool from a, like these are little design notes that almost nobody would ever notice except me, but I think it's really cool to have those those hidden design elements in a game. And somebody's going to notice it and go, holy crap, how did they do that? They might think somebody manually created all of those. I didn't manually create that. That would be silly. So instead, I created an image that's 180 times the size of these cards, and then I'm just shifting it over. Actually, 180 isn't quite right, but it's huge. It's an image that's the height of the card, but it's really long, right? And so I'm just shifting it over by half the width of the card every time we move to a new card. Anyway, I'm not going to get into how I did that specifically. I'm probably going to do a video on specifically that later. That's a long, involved process. I just wanted to show you what's possible here. Does that make sense? So I wanted to show you the parallax. This is also doing something called conditional rendering. Now, if I go forward one card here, you'll note, look at the little icons down here at the bottom. I'm turning on different elements as I'm going, right? And if you look up here, when we get back to Arnold, where's Arnold? He's loading. Sorry, it's taking a second here. 3 wounds instead of 2 wounds, right? So I'm actually, based on the card, I'm turning different things on and off, and rendering things differently for each individual unit. And these are all kinds of things that you can achieve with Component Studio. Now, if we go back over to here, we're going to talk a little bit about Magnate. Actually, I'm not even going to talk about that piece. But let's do this. This is not a particularly pretty game. I'm not proud of this. But it does a lot of really interesting things. There are a lot of really interesting things going on here. So I'm using graphics that are layered in many aspects here to draw this little up and down thing that's going on right there. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. When I go there, sometimes it's down. It has a different number in it. You'll note that there's like a little transparency that's on top, and the thing that's in the background is on the bottom, but then there's a font in between, so you can do a lot of little sandwiching things with layers. And you'll note some of these cards, if I go back to this 8-plex here, it has a table down here. So have you ever tried to draw a table in Illustrator or Photoshop? This is a total pain in the ass, right? No? It's not? Okay. Then you should show us your... No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, it's terrible to deal with that sort of stuff. So Component Studio, we actually set up a component in here. Where is it? There's a lot of stuff in this one. I don't know. It's in here somewhere. You'll just have to trust me. Does anybody see it?
It's called TBC. Yeah, you just want to scroll back down.
Scroll back down.
There you go. Right. Tables.
I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's in here somewhere. There's a table element that defines the actual table, and then oh, this one, I'm not using tables. Yes. Here. Let me show you. I hand drew this table using Component Studio, and I'm like, this is stupid, right? Why am I drawing this table? I've got all of this crap in here. So I wrote a feature. I just added a feature to do this because it's why should anybody keep track of that stuff? So instead of, there's like all of these cells here to draw that little table, and instead with the table feature, I basically, and we'll demonstrate a table later. It's coming back to me now. Sorry. We'll demonstrate a table later. But with the table feature, you literally just add a table. It's defining the cells for you, like where they're all positioned, and then you can say, okay, I want an image in this cell, I want some text in that cell, whatever it is that you're trying to do. It will maintain those positions for you. So then if you go back and update how the table is drawn, it will automatically reposition everything where it should be. If you want borders on your table or not, it takes care of all of that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's what I wanted to show with that. You can, the system will have lots of little variables like this. So these are variables that are defined by the data that I've uploaded, and then the variables are defined by the system itself. So I can use those variables in my various components as I'm going here. So that's how, for example, I have the cost of this 8-plex here. There's actually a cost variable right there. And when I click on it, it copies it to my clipboard, and now I can paste that into one of these things and make it use that. So it's all data-driven, and it's doing that based on a spreadsheet. You can upload a spreadsheet, like a Google Sheet or Excel or whatever, directly into this, or you can edit right in Component Studio and create all the data for your cards. And that's how it's automatically generating all of these cards. You have a spreadsheet of data that gets filled in on each one. So you design the layout once, and then it's basically templating, popping in all the data where it needs to go. All right? It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Did I see a hand go up somewhere? No. Okay, cool. All right, so let's go back to here. Okay, now in Component Studio, we do everything in pixels. And when you're doing print, everything comes down to pixels anyway. You're talking about DPI and all that kind of stuff. Rather than having people translate from inches into pixels or millimeters into dots or whatever, we do everything in pixels. So we show a little ruler on every component that shows you kind of where everything is. 1 inch equals 300 pixels. So if you care about inches, if you want to work in that mode, then you'll just know that 1 inch is where the 300 is on that chart, right? So therefore, our bleeds are always 1/8 of an inch. So that's that little red line is at 1/8 of an inch. The margin of error is another 1/8 of an inch over. So that's the blue line. We're showing you these templates right from the game crafter in this system. Now, that doesn't mean you have to use the game crafter to produce stuff with this. Actually, we can export out to a print and play PDF that you can print at home. You can export out to a CMYK PDF that you send off to a long run production printer like Panda or whoever. You can export directly into Tabletop Simulator and turn your board game into a video game. So it can do all kinds of stuff. You're just doing, the one, you design it once and it goes out all of these other places. So I already sort of gave that one away, so we'll go on with that. So you can't have half of a pixel. Pixels, you can't be half, right? So it's a pixel or it's not a pixel. So in this case, we're rounding. The bleed line is at 37 pixels. Okay, so a couple things about performance. You're using a web app here. This is not on your computer. There are a lot of reasons for this. One of them is compatibility. People use different things. Some people will use an iOS device. Some people will use a Mac. Some people will use a Windows device or Linux or Android or who knows what. I don't want to have to write this app for lots of different platforms. The other thing is just trying to get it installed. There is so much going on the back end of this. There's PDF generation and image generation and caching of files and so, like if you were trying to do it on here, there's enough power on here, but there's not a lot of, yeah, you get it. So anyway, getting that stuff installed and getting it running, it meant it should be an internet app. So you have to deal with some of the things that come along with that. You're dealing with big images. So a big image will render slower. So once you get the image into the system, turn it off. If you don't need to render it for, while you're editing, if you just hide that image, you can turn it back on later, but it'll render a little faster by doing that. If you're not, you'll notice there was lots of steps in that one thing. You can collapse and expand steps. If you keep everything collapsed, everything will run faster. It's not having to interact with that piece. We talked about hiding giant images. There's also a cache in here. So if you have 80 steps when you're designing something, if you're typically editing at the end, everything is progressive, right? You start with the background, you keep working forward and adding layers. Typically, that's how most people work. So the layers that you have created before, we cache them. So when you when you make a change in the system, it's going to start from the last point that you edited and then start rendering from there. So by working from the background to the foreground of your image, everything will load and render way faster. Okay. So I thought maybe together as our little task, just to show you that anything is possible, we'd design Munchkin in Component Studio. I'm going to show you a couple more screens of Component Studio first before we get into that, but I thought this would be a nice little fun task. We can show you kind of how variables work. We can show you some progressive layouts of what you can do with dynamic text and images, and we'll just go from there. Does that sound good to everybody? All right, cool. And this is a game that a lot of people have seen, so you'll know kind of what the thing should look like when we're done. Okay, so I'm not going to use any copyrighted images of Munchkin in this, obviously, because that would be wrong. So we're not going to do that. But we are going to demonstrate a complete ground-up build showing lots of different aspects of Component Studio. Yeah.
Sorry, can it create an image, or do you use basically just putting pictures on top of each other? So let's say I had a red and a green box.
Mm-hmm.
Could I say it should be red? Do I have to have a red box?
No, you can actually, it can draw shapes and that sort of stuff. It can do gradients and a lot of the things that you can do in Photoshop or Illustrator. Now, you might find it easier to do those things in Photoshop or Illustrator and then import them as an image rather than drawing them here. It's up to you. But yeah, we can absolutely draw shapes and that sort of thing. You're not going to use this to paint individual pixels,
No,
but
but I'm thinking like, you know, in my data I have red and green. I don't want to have to make a red box. If I can
yeah,
say,
no. Yeah, you can dynamically change fonts, text, or you know, the text that's actually in the font. You can change sizes of boxes and text and circles and hexes and whatever. You know, all the basic primitive shapes. You can change colors on the fly. You can change sizes on the fly. You can change positions on the fly. Everything can be templated and organized. So you're all good. Okay. So at this point, I'm putting the presentation away, and we're going to go live for everything. So the first thing, again, we're going to build Munchkin. But first, I wanted to show you a little bit more about Component Studio, so you have a little bit more understanding of everything it's capable of before we get into actually building something. So the first thing I want to show you is that Component Studio has a couple of utilities in it, and we'll probably add more utilities over time. This utility actually allows you to do the nicking that we just demonstrated earlier in Illustrator. If you guys were in the class earlier this morning, you saw that nicking can be a pain in the ass when you're designing chits, custom chits, and things like that you want to upload. So I'm going to show you just how easy nicking can be. I'm going to throw in a relatively complicated thing here. You basically just drag a file. So actually here, I'll drag a different file in too, so you can see how that works. We'll just do this. So this is a relatively simple one. Let's start with that. Okay. So there's my, this is the design that I want cut out. And you can see that I've got some nicks already in this design. There's a nick here and a nick here. There's a nick here and a nick here. But that's not enough. Generally speaking, you should have at least 3 nicks per component that you're putting in here. Otherwise, it's really easy for it to fall out. It's showing you, we can actually show you the travel path of how the laser is going to move through the file. Okay, so this is not a terribly optimized travel path, right? It's covering the same ground multiple times. So you can actually just go in here and we'll select a different tool. We're going to sequence paths. So we know the laser is coming in from the upper left corner. That's in the GameCrafter documentation, and you just saw it animate from the upper left corner. So we'll just start. We want our first cut to kind of be here. So actually, let's start with nicking before we do into sequencing. So I'm going to split at point. There are a couple of ways you can do nicking. I can do split into equal parts. So if I do that, I'll click on here and split path. I've got it set to 2 equal parts down here. So it's asking me, do you want to split path 6 into 2 equal parts? I say yes, and boom, there is now a nick placed there. We didn't have to do anything fancy. It's just done. The other thing that you can do is you can actually, if you want it on a specific point, you just click the path that you're working on, and then I say, let's say I want to put that nick right here. Click there, and so now it's marking where it is. Now I've got the nick there. So you see how that works. Anyway, let's move on to actually sequencing something. You basically are just going to click on the number that you want to be the sequence. You can see the order of operations. I'm gonna animate the path again just quick so you can again see where we're coming in. We're coming in for the upper left, and we're tracing around like this. So we want to progressively move down the sheet as we're going, right? We want it to do that. It's going up and down and all over the place. We don't want that. So I want this path right here. This is my closest nick to this corner. So I want this path to be my first thing. So I'm starting at position 1. I'm going to click right here. Now that's the first path. You see it renumbered it right there. Okay. And so then I maybe want to go to 2 here, and I want to go to 4 here, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right. So now if I reanimate that path, much more orderly. All right. Cool. And you can also see right here that we saved, this may be too small on the screen, but we saved 20% of our overall travel length. Part of 0.10% of that was the path length, and most of that was travel length. Travel length, the difference between that, path length is how long is it actually cutting, the places where it's going to cut. Travel length is when the laser is moving around and not doing anything. So that's completely wasted space, right? You want to have your travel length be as little as possible. So anyway, that's an example of one of the things that you can do with utilities in here. This isn't about designing a component. This is just some extra stuff we threw into Component Studio to help your...
Just a quick question
Yeah.
on that. Can you undo and go back to your
yeah, actually.
path? So you can try a new path, and if it doesn't work, you can go back to the other one, or do you have to manually
Right.
read?
Yeah, so right now, this version of Component Studio doesn't have that. So the cool thing is that the designer of this particular utility, who we licensed it from, is sitting in the room right now. And he showed me earlier today that that undo is coming. So undo will be available very shortly. So.
Tell them why the savings of the travel length is so important.
Oh, right. Yeah, Otto had covered it earlier, but I forgot to mention it here. So saving travel length is very important because for every motion that the laser takes on the gantry system, where it's actually doing stuff, whether it's cutting or not, we're charging you for the linear inches that it's moving, right? And so the less it moves, the less you get charged. That's simple. Anyway, so we did this one already. We did this one already. All right. Component Studio works off of projects. So you'll define a project. There's some settings that you can put into a project. I'm not going to go into that, but you're just basically going to define a project, and then all of the things that you do within Component Studio will be tracked to that project. One of the things you can do with a project is add collaborators. So if you have friends that are using Component Studio, you can actually share with that. Or if you hire a designer, like Alicia is a graphic designer here in the room, she works with other clients that are using Component Studio to design stuff for you in there. She'll lay it out and make it look nice, but you still get to interact with it and give feedback and make changes on your own because you're collaborating with each other on the same project. So you can do those kind of things. We also allow you to use whatever fonts that you might want to use in Component Studio. By default, Patrick had in the last presentation, he was talking about the Google fonts. Every Google font that's out on their site is automatically imported into here. But you can also just scroll to the bottom of the list here and upload your own font. So you can import any fonts that you want, including like stuff from Adobe Typekit or DaFont or any of the other sites you can go get fonts from. So in this case, I'm creating a palette for Component Studio Unleashed. So these are the fonts that I have set for this particular project. Okay. Then we can move over. Another thing that you can use Component Studio for, you get, I forget how much, is it like 20 gigs of storage that we give you, I think, with Component Studio. So you can upload, what's that?
I was just, wow, that's a lot of storage.
It'll hold you over for a while, I think. So you can upload images into Component Studio. You don't have to. If you're already storing your stuff in Google Drive or Dropbox or Imager or something like that, you can just use the images directly out of the place you're storing them, as long as there is a publicly accessible URL. But if you want to put them in a central location, you can do that here. So you can upload your images directly into here. Again, we talked about the spreadsheets. Yeah.
Does that affect load time if it's on your server versus third party?
A little bit the first time, but not really, because what happens is we'll download it and we'll cache it while you're working on the app, so that way we're not downloading it every time you're running. So it'll cache for, I think, 6 hours or something after you, upload it, or after you use it for the first time. So it'll be a little bit faster, but not a huge amount. Spreadsheet, we talked about before. I'm not really going to get into editing the spreadsheet, but just suffice it to say you can just type in there and get stuff. You put URLs in there. Okay. So here we go. Just a reminder, because you may not have played Munchkin before, or if it may have been a while. So I wanted to just show you kind of what some of the Munchkin cards look like, so we can start working on this. There's just different text that might go in here. There's, for example, some of them will have a little not usable by somebody. There's the title. There might be a bonus in there. So note how these cards are they're dynamically spacing themselves based on what attributes are turned on. Now, Steve Jackson Games isn't using Component Studio at this point, or they weren't back when they were using when they designed this game. So certainly someone manually was laying out every single card. But even if you have greatly variable text or greatly variable elements, like this, you might think, well, I can't automate it because not every card isn't the same. But that's not true. Component Studio can dynamically handle all of that kind of stuff. So there may be some things that it doesn't do, like this little thing here. We're not gonna be able to wrap. Maybe we will in the future, but there are some things that aren't going to be easy to do in an automated fashion. But almost everything else we can handle there. So we're going to place some things down here in static positions. We're going to put images in, the whole 9 yards. All right. Any questions about what we're going to try to do? Okay. So let's see what we can do. We have half an hour, I guess, before we have to get out of here. So we'll see what we can do. I've already started by putting a background color and the border color on there. I'll just show you those very quickly. So what I did was I put a box. When you add a component, you're just hitting these steps down here. So there's box, circle, whatever. So in this case, I started with a box. I just put in a color for it, and I told it to be the size of the width here is dynamically pulled from the bottom. These are system variables. So this is the width of the component minus 164 pixels. I worked out, Steve Jackson cards are kind of an oddly shaped card. They're not like precisely 2 inches wide or 2.5 inches wide or whatever. They're done in millimeters, so the numbers are a little different. But what that is it's saying we've got a certain amount of bleed on here, and we also have a certain amount of border that we want to have. So that border, or this box right here, is going to be that the width of the card minus this amount, and we're going to center it. We're using these variables right here, center me X and center me Y, which again we just pulled in from down here, to center that box right in the object. The thing that's cool about that is if I go back to the designs here and I change this component to be something else, maybe we'll change it to be taro sized. Now I come back in here and it automatically readjusted everything because we're using variables to position where everything is. It automatically readjusted the size of that box to fit that new component type. Does that make sense? So that can, what's that? Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Is that better? Okay, I can probably, actually let's go back to here and US Game Deck. Okay, so there, you can kind of see what's going on. So the other thing that I did is I told it that we're going to have a border that's going to be 100 pixels wide, and it's going to be this brown color, and we're going to round corners, and they're going to be 60 pixels. The radius of that corner is going to be 60 pixels. So that's how we're getting this nice round corner right in there, right? So we did the whole background with one step in Component Studio, okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and collapse that. Now, doors have a different color than there's two different kinds of cards in Munchkin. Sorry, brain fart. It's getting late. So there are two different kinds of colors of card or kinds of cards in Munchkin. So you have, if I turn this one off, you'll see that there's a little bit different color in here. Now we can dynamically change those colors, or we can have multiple steps and we can do conditions on them. So in this case, our data is set up that, did I have that in here? Oh, I didn't even put that into my data. If I had a type, I could have added a card type. Oh, I did have a card type right there. All right. So with the card type, we'll go into advanced here. I can say if door will do this. So what's going to happen is it's taking this variable out of the spreadsheet, and it's saying if that variable is equal to the word door, then we're going to render this color. Oh, and I did it on the wrong one. So I'll take that out of there. We'll open this one up. We'll come down here. I'm going to go into advanced. I'm going to conditionally render. I'm going to paste this in here like so. And so now if it's door, it will render this first one. And if it's not door, we're going to go down here and we're going to change this one to not door. It will render that one, right? And so I could put that in there, or I could have put a color for each card, going back to your question, and then I could have just pasted that variable for these things directly into here, right?
So yeah, like the variable name could be right in that color box.
That's right. Yeah. So you can just kind of paste those. You can just take this variable name from right down here and just paste it right into this color box. But I didn't do that. That's not how I set up my spreadsheet in this case. But you can set your stuff up however you like. Make sense so far? Okay. We can also design the backs of these cards. I'm not gonna do that, but I just wanted to show you. You can design the faces and the backs. If you have unique backs, you can have individual things, or you can design the back once and it'll do it for the whole deck. Okay, so the first thing that we want to, did I see a hand go up? Sorry. Okay, no. The first thing that maybe we want to put in here is, let's do, I don't know, what, a title? Let's do with a title. So we'll just go ahead and hit text here. And by default, there's going to be a little bit of text in here just to show you what's going on. Just to, we'd like to put in kind of sample data in for everything. So if I added, let's say I went down here and added a hex, it's going to draw a hex and it's going to have a color and that sort of stuff. You'll just go in and modify those things. But we want there to be something that appears on the screen so that you have something to work from, right? So every one of these things, when you add them in, is going to have some amount of something or other. In this case, we just put a little text blurb in here. So I want to put in the title, or the name, I should say. I'm going to go ahead and paste that in here. Okay, and so that's going to match up with the name of the card up here. I'm going to want to use a font like Windless right there. We're going to want a color. I'm just going to type in brown. Now you can type in names of colors. You can use the little color selector here and grab a color and do whatever you want, that sort of thing. You can use variables in colors. You can do whatever you want with these things. But for the purposes of this, because I don't care if I'm color accurate to what their game is, we're not actually making the game here. I'm going to type it in and do brown. And if you type in something bad, it will tell you, hey, you typed in an invalid thing. So anyway, okay, I want that to be a little bigger, so we're going to go up to 70 pixels on that. And we're going to do a few other things. Let's go under advanced here. I'm going to say I want the box that I define for the text, I want it to fit in that box. So if it has to shrink the font down a little bit, I'm okay with that. We can do those kinds of things. So what is the box that I'm defining this text in? Let's draw an outline area. Do you see that little white line? It's drawing an outline showing you where we're going to take that box. So the problem with zooming this in is these things are getting really small here, so you're not going to see them as well, but hopefully we'll be able to get through this anyway. I'm going to set my box size. I want to set the height here to, let's say, just 200 pixels. So I've got my box is now 200 pixels. I want it to be the full width of the card, but I want a little bit of a margin inside that inside of our border, right? So I have in this box here, again, you can't really see it. I have minus 150. We know that it was 164, so let's do something more like around 175 is where I'm going here. And I'm sorry that you can't see that formula that well because I've got it zoomed in, but just have to trust me there. So we made it a little bit smaller. And the other thing we have is this box is naturally centered. We don't want it to be centered. We want it to start, let's say, up here around, we can see our line. Here's 100 pixels, so maybe we want it to start there. Maybe we want it to start a little bit further down. I don't know. You can just kind of, you look at your design and kind of determine where it is that you want that to start. So we outline the text area like so. And this font has some kind of weird thing where it's extending above. So, I'll have to look into that.
So can you do any alpha in the colors?
Oh yeah, you can absolutely do alpha. So let's show you that since you're asking the question. You know what, I'm going to do this for now. Okay, so you wanted to do alpha. So you can do alpha a couple of different ways. Every step you can set an opacity. So you can say, you know, something like this. I want it to be that, and so it's fading into the background. You can also set it right in the color. So for example here, this is a, if you've worked with HTML, there are 6 digits to a hex number like this, right? We actually allow 8 digits. The last 2 digits are for alpha. So right here, we're doing, you know, kind of this red color, right? Then I can take this little slider right here, and you're seeing I'm adjusting alpha. And that's actually adding, like I said, the 8th character, or the 7th and 8th character over there. So you have opportunities to do those kinds of things. Okay, so we've got our title in there. You know what? I'm going to make this a little bit. Let me make this a little bit smaller as well. Let's do something around 100 pixels for now, because that'll be important when later. Yeah, we'll come back to that. Oh yeah, just to show you that we're designing multiple cards at the same time, I can, you know, I'm switching through these, and you're seeing that it's changing colors, it's changing fonts, etc., or names, etc. So now we want to add another element into our design. We don't know how tall this thing is going to be. This piece where the text is, we don't know how tall that is. It might be variable, is what I'm saying. What if it wraps to 2 lines or something like that? We want the next thing to follow on after that. So if I go ahead and grab, let's say, this special rule here, we're actually going to collapse this one because we're kind of done with it for now. Except that I'm going to start with, I'm going to actually start with all those settings that we just tweaked. I want to start with that as my next thing. So rather than hitting add text, I'm actually just going to hit this little copy button here, and it will give me a duplicate of that thing. So I'm going to name that first one title, and then I'm going to name this one special rule. All right, and so we're going to take that and we're going to put special rule right in there. Now, one thing you know what? I didn't define my fonts here. Let's do this, and let's go in here and let's define a secondary font. And let's move this down just for a second so that you can see what we're doing before we get into the other things. So you can define multiple fonts in a single text area, and if you just by putting in a thing like this, right, it'll switch to another font. So you're just putting asterisks around it. So in the special rule text over in the spreadsheet, there's actually 2 asterisks in there for clerics, right? And so it's automatically, just in my text, I put an asterisk around the word cleric, and so it knows I'm going to switch to the secondary font. So I've defined the first font here, and then, where's my mouse? Here, and then I've defined an alternate font here, and maybe I want to put this one in as red or, you know, whatever. And I can change, you know, the size of it. We want that to be 65. We're going to change this one to be 65. Again, any of these text areas where I'm typing in, you can put variables in them, anything. So the font size could be a variable if you wanted it to be. Okay, so I've decided, in this case, I actually want it to be brown. The only difference is that I want this to be bold wherever I've put that asterisk. So there we go. So there's my special rule. But I want my special rule to automatically follow the height of the previous thing. The cool thing is that the system automatically has a variable down here called prev_y. So instead of putting in 350 pixels here, I can say prev_y. And so now it's going to automatically build my card such that whatever came before this, the next thing comes directly under that. Now let's say I wanted a little bit of spacing in there. I can just go inside of the braces. Everything inside of a brace is like programmable, if you will. So this is your template that you're filling out. So if I want to do there, I can go in there and type +50, right? And so now it's going to follow the previous, and then I'm going to add 50 pixels to that. So I've got a little bit of a space between these things. Pretty cool, right? Yeah. So now the cool thing is, let's see if one of these will wrap. If it doesn't, I'll make it wrap. Hippie Crystals. Oh, Hippie Crystals doesn't have a... Neither of these have special text. All right, let's go give them a special text just so we have, so we can use it as an example. Where is my spreadsheet here? Hippie Crystals, special rule right there. We're just going to put some stuff in here. Okay, just for giggles. All right, so now we'll go back over here to Hippie Crystal. All right, now I want Hippie Crystals to wrap. So I'm just going to go back up here to the title, and I'm going to say we're going to make this a little less wide just for right now. I'm going to make this, I'm going to change that to 2. Oh, wait, I have it automatically resizing, right? So it's going to fit that. So let's go back down here and turn off fit text. And then let's make our box a little bit bigger, because I made this really small because I was actually building it. So now you're seeing how it's dynamically pushing the whole thing down because this thing wrapped. Now I needed more space to do the next thing, right? So that's what's going on with our design here. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this stuff back to where it was, because it's going to be more useful for our for a little demonstration here. Fit text to box. And what else did I do here? I did something. Oh, I changed the width, right? Yeah. Okay. So you get the idea. But you also saw, the cool thing is that in my mistake there, you still saw something cool. You saw the title resize itself to fit that area, right? Because it wasn't going to fit otherwise. So this is that whole concept of automation. We're dynamically generating all of this stuff, and it's doing the right thing because we told it to do the right thing. So we don't have to do that. We don't have to make minute modifications for cards that don't fit into the layout that we had, right? It will go in and do that for us. Okay, so now the next thing we want to do in here is we want to make this special rule to be, if it doesn't have a special rule, we just want to ignore this step. So all I have to do is I can just copy this this variable out of here, or I could go back down here and hit the special rule variable. I just want to put it in my clipboard is what I'm saying, so I don't have to type it out. You can type it out if you want, but I don't want to. So I'm going to go in here into advanced, and I'm going to say conditionally render, and all I have to do is put in that special rule. If it's empty or 0, if it equates to empty or 0, it automatically says, no, we're not doing this thing, right? So I don't have to put in something that looks like equals quotes that are empty. It's just implied, all right? So we're going to skip this step if the special rule doesn't exist for this particular card. So I'm going to go ahead and close this one down. And now, why don't we put in an image? Did I see a hand? I thought I saw a hand. Sorry. Looking up and down, and it's, yeah. Yeah.
Generally, if it equates to true, it renders it, right?
Yeah, if it equates to anything that's not empty or 0, it will do it.
But in this case, it's, oh, no, never mind.
There is one in this case, because we added a, oh, okay. So I want to add an image next. So let's hit this little image button. And the cool thing about images, I could click on this little icon here and then go look in my folders that I've uploaded and pick an image and just put it right into here. But most of the time, that's good if you have a common icon or a common background or something like that. But most of the time, you're going to plug a variable into there because every card or whatever will probably have a custom image. So what we're going to do is go down here. If we went into our spreadsheet, which is somewhere here, you can see that I have images already plugged, I have URLs to images already plugged into the spreadsheet. So I'm going to go ahead over here and grab the image variable, and I'm going to paste that directly into here. And now one of the things is that I want this image to be centered. So I'm going to go down here and we're going to say center me X. I want it to centered within the card, right, on the X axis. But on the Y axis, I want it to go to prev X, or prev Y, sorry. Whatever the last thing was, I want to go in here, image, just putting that in my label. I want to put that into Y. And so now it's going to follow on with the next thing. Now in this case, I don't remember if I uploaded these I think I uploaded these images and they have spaces built into them. You don't want to do that when you're designing things. You don't want to have extra white space built into your image, because when you do that, then you're going to have these kind of gaps, because Component Studio doesn't know that this is clear, that this is transparent in your image. It just knows your image started up there somewhere, right?
What image formats does it take? Is that the PNG then?
This is a PNG because it has transparency. It'll take PNG or JPEG. You can upload either.
Consistent white space above it, though, you could center previous Y minus.
Yes, if you had a consistent white space above it, and maybe I do in these images, so let's give that a try.
You got height on that secondary text too, the box.
Oh, right, I do have height on that. Yeah, but it's not actually taking the box. When it does these calculations, it doesn't use the box for previous Y or previous X. It's using where the text ended, the pixel of the text. Because you need to be able to design boxes that are variable in size, right? So it's actually going to use where the text renders. So if I go, let's go back over to our special rule just to show you how, just to show you what I'm talking about here. Let's outline the text area, and let's make the text area bigger. This isn't going to change how much text is there, but, well, it's centering in the middle of this particular thing because I have that. Let me put that toward the top up here. There. So despite how big this thing is, it's not going to change. It's not changing, you know, the text area size isn't changing the position of the image. It is in this case when I have these things centering like this, because the actual position of the text changed, obviously.
Is it going from the very lowest point of a J then?
Yes, yeah. Wherever the last pixel was rendered of that font, it will pick that and go in there. So it's smart like that. That's very important because, again, you have these kind of variable lengths on your text. Other components don't work that way. It's the box area you're defining is the thing. So the image area, the size of the image, it's using that. It's not using where is the last transparent pixel or non-transparent pixel in the image. It's just text, because text are the things that are variable in that way. Like everything else in your component, in your designs, are going to have very kind of static sizes. So, okay, so I don't actually want this centered. Now that I'm thinking about it, for our special rule, we wouldn't want that vertically centered. We'd want it kind of there. So it's good that we did this anyway, because now we're going back over here. Okay, so let's go back to your idea here that maybe my images have a consistent spacing at the top. Let's hope, because I didn't even think about that when I uploaded these. Oh, and I forgot to turn off my text box here. So let's go ahead and do that. And you're right, we also added, somebody else pointed out that I added this extra plus 50 here that we didn't really need to add. Okay. So, you know, maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't add those kind of things. So we've got our image in there, and again, it is dynamically spacing. But if we go to the next one, it may not have this special rule in here, and because we made that special rule dynamic, the image automatically bumped itself up to the previous thing, right? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, and we're getting really close to the end of time here. I could add some more things in, but I think you're kind of starting to get this. It's taking me a little longer because we've had questions along the way. I'm sorry about that. But I will be putting out a series of advanced videos on kind of the cooler things that we can do, but I want to give you guys some time here, since we're getting close to the end of time, to ask questions or maybe do some other demonstrations that you're interested in seeing. So, yeah.
Can you, oh, sorry.
On this picture, we see that the image is over the text.
That's because we did. Oh, you mean you're talking about the Z on this. So what's in the foreground versus what's in the background. These. Yeah, the thing that's it's not really the position of these steps, it's these numbers over here. So if I wanted this image to go behind that text, I could say this is going to be 10. The problem with that, in this case, 10 is behind our background actually. So let's do 20. The problem with that in this case is that I want my image. Oh, I got a different. All right, 35. I'll put 35. That's not the same as anything. The problem, no, this is what I was getting at. The problem with this is that we're actually using this step to make the previous of the next step to make the previous of the next step. So by moving that into the background in this case, because we're using something that came before it to dynamically place its space, you can't change the elevation.
Change the variable to the next line down this step?
No, it's previous, and that's it. Yeah.
Previous is by those numbers, not necessarily by the order they are in the steps on the way.
Right. So these numbers aren't changing because it gets confusing. If these little boxes actually flipped around as you're typing in numbers, it gets really confusing. We had it do that early on. But if you refresh this page, if I do that right now, it will now show that the image is above the special rule here. All right. But I'm just going to go back in here and put this where it was supposed to be. And so, yeah, that's the order of operations here is telling you the elevation of the layers. But when you're doing that with previous Y, that can cause some issues. So just be aware of that. Yes?
When you export it to PDF,
Yeah.
can you ignore the bleed?
It automatically ignores the
It
bleed.
automatically, okay,
That's
so
it.
you can get it so it does like 7.5 inches across for 3 cards.
Right, so let's just export a print and play PDF so you can see this. So I get to choose, do I want it US letter or A4 for my, what sheet size am I printing to? Do I want it to generate the backs or not? Because a lot of times people will sleeve a print and play so they don't even need the backs in the output. And then you can also say if there are certain components you don't want to reprint in this case because you've already printed them, so I only changed these 4 cards, I can exclude the cards I don't care about, right? So I can do that sort of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and export that. It's going to automatically send me an email when it's done exporting because that it can take a while. It will also pop up a little thing on my screen right here, like it just did, and I can click on that and it'll download the PDF. And then we can go ahead and look, and there it generated the PDF, and it took the bleeds out. There's just the border is there, but the bleed is gone.
Oh, okay, perfect.
So, and it's also showing you the cut lines. It's also showing you your trim lines so that if you can take your scissors or your guillotine cutter
right.
or whatever, and it'll tell you exactly where you need to trim. Okay, so that's a print and play PDF. There are, again, other things that you can export as, but that was just one quick example. Yes?
Can you show how the line works?
How the line?
The line item?
Oh, drawing a line?
Yeah, drawing a line.
That is the most complicated one. I'm really sorry. I'm gonna try and come up with a better way to do it.
2 X's and 2 Y's, but there's like space between 3 lines.
Yeah.
Gotta make it work.
I'll show you. It's because it's a multi-line thing.
There's no thickness.
Right. So this is the most complicated. Line and polygon are basically the same thing. One is filled and one is not filled. These are really complicated to use, and I'm sorry for that. It's just I couldn't think of a better way to do it and still be flexible. So let's make this, I don't know, blue or something so that it's a little easier to see. So it's by default got this little Z pattern in there. The reason it has multiple X's and Y's is because a line isn't just a line, it can be multiple points in the current implementation. The reason I did that is because I wanted it to be compatible with polygon, because I was thinking about merging the two. I think I'm probably going to go back and change line so it's not compatible with polygon and just it's a line. So, but if you want it to just be a line, all you have to do is kind of come in here and delete these 2 points. And so now you're just drawing between point 1 and point 2. There's my little thing. We can also position this, so maybe I want this to be 100 pixels from the edge, let's say. There's my line. And now maybe I want this line to go diagonally across the thing here, so I'm going to change my y-axis for the second point to be 600. Oops. Okay.
So the position is like a hidden anchor you don't see.
Yeah, it's allowing you...
At one point you start off of that anchor.
Right. Because people often want to work off of Cartesian coordinates, like 0 is up here and so on. So the position, by having it allowing you to draw from 0 when you're figuring out what your positions are, but then you can move it into place. Okay. So yeah, it's unnecessarily complicated. I'll eventually figure out how to make it better. So anyway, that's line. The rest of the steps aren't nearly as unnecessarily complicated. Okay, any other questions? The line is 1 pixel. There is no way to do a width on a line at this point. Maybe at some point I'll get around to that as well. Yeah, no. Line is by far the weakest thing in there, and it's hard to use. I fully admit it. So anything else? Yeah.
In the beginning, you mentioned having multiple templates in a single deck.
Multiple templates.
I saw that on one of your first slides.
The mutation.
Oh, mutation. Yeah, I'm sorry. Let's go back to, let's see here. Here we go. Okay. So mutation really comes down to being able to turn things on and off or switch them based on what's going on. So, for example, this card, completely different color, and it's also got a different layout. So at the top here, there's a play immediately, which is automatically pushing everything down, right? So we're mutating that layout. There's also nothing going on here, and this table isn't here, right? So different cards have different layouts depending on that stuff. Now you can go really crazy. That's a simple example. Like the card looks roughly similar, so you can do that. I'm trying to think if I have a good example that's like really crazy different. I probably do somewhere, but it's not coming to me quickly. But the mutation is all about being able to turn elements on and off and have them move around on the screen based on what else is on the screen. So we just did that with our, we were also just doing mutation with this, right? It's automatically pushing things down based on what else came before it. So that's mutation. We're out of time. Okay, I'm sorry guys, we got to call it here, but hopefully that was a good intro to Component Studio. And like I said, I'll put out some videos to get into more of the advanced content that we weren't able to get to in this presentation. So thank you.